Here to present to you all a document that we have been working on since the council made the decision back in August to move the initiative forward to the voters. We have been working on basically a letter of intent, a basic letter of intent with a binding letter of intent, I should say, with New Mexico United to come to agreements on New Mexico United's investment in this project and a long-term commitment to a partnership with the city of Albuquerque and the citizens of our community. So it is important for all of us to recognize that, at least from the city's perspective, is that the voters obviously have the ultimate say here in terms of whether or not this bond will be approved. And we are continuing to provide as much information to them as they make the decision and early voting begins sometime in mid-October. So today I'm here to announce today that we have signed a basic letter of intent with New Mexico United, in which New Mexico United is making an unprecedented commitment to this project. Let me give you a perspective of this. This project is, New Mexico United has made a commitment up to $32 million of support for the construction of the facility and the payments to the city in the future for this program. Let me give you a little breakdown of what that means. $10 million capital investment up front from New Mexico United for the purposes of constructing this facility. This is a amount of private sector funding to support the gap, if you will, that we had as it relates to building this facility. And so it is a contribution that will be made available to the city prior to construction of the facility. And that's an important cash up front. The next piece of this is an agreement to lease the facility for 25 years of $800,000 a year payment to the city. Additionally, the team has agreed to $100,000 a year of minimum payment for concessions and revenues generated from the facility, at a minimum of $100,000. Altogether, this is a $32 million deal for this project, and it is by far one of the best, if you will, deals that many of our folks, including our consultants, have said across the country. I want to thank Peter and the business ownership group of New Mexico United for stepping up and doing and making this a deal that works for all of us. And it's one more point in the information that the community will have as knowledge about what this deal is all about. Remember, this is an opportunity, again, to build a 10 to 12,000 seat facility. We have said consistently through the course, and we presented to the council, that we believe this project is somewhere between $65 and $70 million. With the amount of funds that are now being put forth by the team, should the voters approve the $50 million, we now have about $68 million available to build this facility. Let me just say this is an important milestone. The details, I'm happy to go through those details a little bit more as we move forward with this conversation today. But let me just say this. In this document, there's also an agreement to work on a CBA in which the team and the city will contribute both services and financially to a community benefits agreement so that we can support whatever neighborhood on the impacts of the facility in the neighborhood that may or may not be selected as it relates to the project. Obviously, as we've said consistently from day one, we are going to have a public process to determine the site locations. We know the consultants have made their recommendations on at least 2 sites. Those sites are obviously up for conversation, but again, we'll have a public process for that. But at the end of the day, depending on where this facility ends up being sited, the commitment from the team and from the city is to jointly fund a CBA to help the neighborhoods as the project gets moved forward. The team has also made a commitment in this lease to do the following. They've committed to have concessions at the facility that is comprised in whole or in part with local and New Mexico vendors. which means our brew pubs from New Mexico, restaurateurs from New Mexico, and other opportunities for vending with New Mexico and local entrepreneurs in the city of Albuquerque and surrounding area. Additionally, the team has agreed to, in the first 3 years of after the construction of the facility, to bring in a women's professional soccer team to New Mexico. Those are important commitments, and commitments that will again ensure that we continue to use the facility and bring a cross-section of sports in the facility for both women's sports and men's sports, which I think is a great opportunity again for use of the facility. Look, New Mexico United has become, and quickly become, a beloved part of our city in terms of its just fan base, the excitement that United has brought to the city over the last 3 years, including through the pandemic, where folks have just loved coming to this facility. And it's really a credit to the ownership group and to the team that we have such great support from our community. So this is really an opportunity for us to provide quality entertainment for our community with a private sector commitment, with a public sector commitment for long-term use of the stadium. And this agreement really shows the city and the commitment from the private sector to make this happen. I also want to just say that we know that at the end of the day, it is really the voters have to make this decision. But this information that we're presenting today really, again, begins to, in my opinion, begins to put some structure and some commitment into the project. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask Peter Trepstein, the owner of the ownership group of the New Mexico United, to come up and say a few words. And then we'll stand for questions after we have a couple of presentations. Peter?
Thank you, Lawrence. Got some prepared remarks that my team knows I'm not going to use anyways, but it makes them feel better momentarily to see that they're up here. So I'll put them here. And I think that was great, Lawrence. In the city, first of all, thank you for your partnership and leadership and your belief in our state and our city. This is a project it's an aspirational project that really can change so many things, and it doesn't happen without strong leadership. I'm glad Lawrence covered some of the quantitative. I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about the qualitative aspect of this, and how we really got here in the first place. Because in 2018, myself and 5 other New Mexican investors, one of which is here right now, Carlos Garcia, and others, we really had a bit of a conundrum. We really had a tough decision to make. We had to decide, do we want to bring a professional soccer team to New Mexico? Or do we want to really listen to a lot of the cynics and skeptics that were saying no, that were saying, hey, professional sports don't work in New Mexico. They always fail. When we looked at the spreadsheets, and looked at the data, we didn't get a lot of positive feedback, right? The spreadsheet said, you know what, there aren't enough millennials in Albuquerque to support a professional team. The city isn't growing at a rate that will sustain a team. And so we had to do what anybody else does that has to make a decision that they feel passionate about and they believe in. And we had to basically follow our heart more than we were going to follow our head. So we ignored the no's and we decided to say yes, that we're going to bring this team forward anyways, because we believe in the grit and the resiliency of New Mexicans. We believe in the spirit of New Mexicans. And most of all, we felt that there were New Mexicans who wanted to come together and unite and basically show that they believe in each other. And we felt that was going to be very powerful and would be enough to sustain the team. And so we looked to 2019, right here behind us in Isotopes Park. I know some of you were there, many of you were there. In March of 2019, over 12,000 people came together for our first game and put aside their differences, frankly. And for 90 minutes, we were united. For 90 minutes, it didn't matter who you voted for in the elections. It didn't matter what your skin color was. It didn't matter what gods you pray to, what language you speak, or what your sexuality was. None of it mattered. Just that for 90 minutes, we were together as one, unified, supporting New Mexico and willing New Mexico on to victory that day. And when Devin Sandoval, Albuquerque's own Devin Sandoval, scored the first goal in the history of our team, this stadium shook. It was like no other moment. And it wasn't just a celebration of the goal. It was us collectively saying that, you know what, New Mexico is good enough to have a professional team. New Mexico is good enough to support and have things that other cities have. And during that season, we had so many magical moments on the field. We led the league in attendance. Over 12,000 people came out to our games, #1 in the league. We made it to the playoffs in our first year. We were one of the final 8 teams in the U.S. Open Cup, which means that we beat actually 2 MLS teams to get there. We were one of the last 8. But as magical as it was on the field, the real magic happened off the field. So many people came to the stadium as they were sitting next to perfect strangers. By the end of the year, they were going to each other's weddings. Friendships were formed. Families came together with a common bond that they could rally around now, and families got closer. And you know, most important, you know, there was an energy that got created inside of this stadium, bringing our state together, our city together. And for those that were here, which is many of us, almost all of us, that was real energy that uplifted our city. Our city felt together and unified in a way that it hadn't felt in the years before. And that was real. And that led to positive change in so many other ways. And in 2020, you know, we had momentum, and then the entire world locked down. And again, the skeptics came out and said, you know what, this team's gonna fold, this team's gonna hibernate, they're gonna go away, they're gonna lay everybody off, and it's gonna disappear after 1 year. And instead, you know, Carlos and myself and the other investors said, you know what, we need to step up, not step out. The city needs us, the state needs us. So what did we do? We were the only professional team that year that played 100% of their games outside of their state, because that was the only thing that we could do, regardless of what that meant financially. Because New Mexico United has never been about maximizing profits. It's always been about maximizing positive outcomes and doing the right thing for our state and for our city. And you know, and this year, let's face it, you know, the pandemic is still here, right? Normalcy isn't quite here yet. It's still out in the horizon. And you know, we don't know what is in store for us. It still feels scary, right? There's still uncertainty. But we do know this. We know that over 8,000 people have come back, beating the drums, lighting smoke bombs, probably doing other things I can't say at a press conference. But the energy has returned, and we're united again. And that's why today, as we talk about a facility, it's so much more than just the economics. Yes, New Mexico United is making a contribution of $32.5 million, $10 million of which is a capital contribution up front for a facility that's a publicly owned facility, not a facility owned by us. As Ernie's going to talk, it creates 780 jobs. And the beautiful thing is, this doesn't raise your taxes a single penny. Yes, we're doing all that, and that's great, but this stadium's about so much more than that. It's about showing the vitality and resiliency of our city. It's about building a bridge of hope for our young people so that we can tell them, you know what, there's more to look forward to down the road. There's a healthy place that you can come and unify and celebrate and be proud of your state. We don't have a lot of places like that right now. It's about bringing a women's team here so we can have more role models. It's about using food from our rural farms and our ranches so that we can have New Mexicans feeding New Mexicans. Because again, it's not about maximizing profits. It's about maximizing positive outcomes. And so I'll just leave with this. This letter of agreement is about so much more than the financial. It's really a promise. It's a promise from our ownership group that we're committed to New Mexico. We're all from here. We're born and raised here, have raised our families here. We're not going anywhere. And this is a commitment that we're here for the long haul. And I think most importantly, it's a commitment that we believe in New Mexico. We believe deeply in our state. We believe deeply in our city. We're willing to put not just our capital, but all of our resources behind it. And we believe that our city is better when it's united and coming together. And this facility is a major step in ensuring that New Mexico United is, and so many other things yet to come are going to be here in the future. So thank you for coming out today and sharing this important moment with us.
Thanks, Peter, and I appreciate the comments and the commitment from the team. Let me now bring Ernie Sidibaca. As you all know, Ernie is the chair of the Hispano Chamber of Commerce, along with his chairman, and I'd like for them to say a few words on behalf of the business community.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you, Peter. It's great to hear investment in New Mexico, investment in Albuquerque, bold investment. You know, that's what we need here in Albuquerque and New Mexico. So the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber, we're comprised of 1,000 members, small businesses throughout Albuquerque and New Mexico. We're in very much support of this stadium, and we are very much in support of where it's located, hopefully in the downtown area. We believe that downtown needs investment, bold investment, to help those small businesses that have suffered through the pandemic and through, you know, what happened during the protests and the riots back a year ago. We need investment. We need bold action. This is what it is. We will never have a stadium if we don't do things like this. So I applaud Peter. I'm here with JP Espinosa. He's our chair of our board. He and the rest of the board, we've met. We've discussed this. We're in support of this investment. I want to say that the 500 jobs that for the building of the construction phase and the 280 full-time jobs, that is a great investment. $400 million to the city is the economic impact. Let me just say this. Soccer fans are different. They will come to the stadium. They will come to the restaurants and the bars, regardless of if there's a local game going on. There is a game of soccer being played all over the world most of the time. If not, we do love to watch videos of great soccer games. And so soccer stadium with restaurants and bars and New Mexicans working to do, to supply beer and alcohol and all food and all the great stuff that people enjoy. I want to say this. The Chamber, we're all about commerce, community, and culture. This checks all three of those boxes. The commerce, there's going to be businesses. Small businesses are going to prosper. The community is going to prosper. They're going to see downtown revitalized if it's placed there. They're also going to see the fact that the community and the culture is going to be shown through the restaurants and the bars and the food that's going to be provided there. So we are steadfastly in support of this. I'm going to let JP say a few words as well, if you'd like.
Thank you. What's really powerful about this is the bold leadership that Peter and the United have set forth, along with the city of Albuquerque. I believe with all my heart that the city of Albuquerque is a world-class city, and therefore we need world-class arenas and world-class sports athletic departments such as the United to come here. See, it's so much powerful when someone goes into I want you to think of a 6-year-old little boy, a 6-year-old little girl who's coming into the United Stadium for the very first time. I can just imagine their hearts beginning to pound because of excitement. And in that moment, a dream is birthed in that young child, saying that they can do great things because of the vision that United and the city of Albuquerque has set forth. It is time that we dream again and that we pursue these dreams because our future needs it. Albuquerque needs it. The state of New Mexico needs it. Here at the Hispano Chamber of Commerce, we believe in what the United and the city of Albuquerque is doing. We encourage our voters to say yes on the ballot box in November because this will further our state. It will create commerce, it will create community, and more importantly, it's going to create culture. And what's beautiful about New Mexico is that we're a culture of united cultures that have come together under one banner, and that banner is our love for our state. And because of the leadership of United, it's allowing us a platform for us to come together on one united voice that we are New Mexicans and we are New Mexico proud, because there's no other greater place to be right here in New Mexico, and I believe that with all my heart, and the Hispano Chamber of Commerce stands firmly behind that. So we are in 100% support, and we encourage you to come out to the ballot boxes and follow this support because New Mexico needs this.
Thank you, Ernie, and thank you, JP, and thank you, Peter, as well, for those great comments. Let me just conclude by saying a few things that are a little bit nostalgic, but also I think really interesting for all of us to put in perspective. For me as a public servant, This really is 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. I was having a similar press conference with the city leadership and the city community about this facility behind us. A letter of intent with the team to build a facility like Isotopes Park, a lot like what we're doing today with United. A vote that went to the public to support building a facility, i.e. the Isotopes Park, and now somewhat deja vu 20 years and some months later to have a similar conversation with the community about yet another opportunity to bring another amenity to the city of Albuquerque, another opportunity to have a city-owned asset that, as Peter described, where a private sector contribution is helping support build a community asset that will be owned by the city of Albuquerque and operated through a lease agreement with the New Mexico United. For those of you who spend a little time dwelling into the financials, let me give you a little bit of a perspective. I say this to my friend Jessica because she writes a lot about these sort of things. So give you a perspective, a $50 million bond for 25 years generates about, or requires the city to pay about $3 million a year in bond payments. With the United contract or letter of intent that we have today, that now brings the city's contribution down to $2 million. So for $2 million a year for 25 years, the city will get potentially a $70 million facility. That is a really, really good economic payback on many levels, number one. Number two, just to make sure we have the numbers correct, if the voters approve the $50 million, we have $8 million, a little over $8 million from the state legislature already appropriated for the project. So that brings our total to $58 million. With United's bold one-time capital contribution of $10 million, we now have $68 million to build this facility. And we have consistently said that we believe this build is somewhere between $65 and $70 million. So this $10 million is now bridges the gap, the financial gap. And of course, we will still continue to go to the legislature to seek their support to help ensure that we have a quality facility. But this is really super important in that now we can move forward if the voters approve this bond and really begin to have the conversation on site location and then eventually get to a point of design and with an eye towards having a new facility for New Mexico United. So with that bit of information, that little bit of a nostalgic walk from the past, I can sure tell you that I've come to many, many Isotopes games after we built the facility. I will tell you here, as honest as I know how to be, when I sit in that baseball stadium and watch baseball, I have never heard anyone come up to me and say, wow, we shouldn't have built this thing. When you see people sitting behind the baseball diamond here, watching and enjoying it with their families, they don't think about the money. What they think about is what's happening in their community, and they think about the enjoyment, the opportunity their children have to watch professional baseball. That is exactly what is going to happen should this all come to fruition. People will be sitting in those stands watching professional soccer, which, by the way, in Albuquerque is the fastest growing sports program in the city for young children. And what better way to support their interests and the interests of this community by having them have a world-class facility that they can enjoy and that maybe they can have a dream of potentially, as JP said, of dreaming about being a player, about representing their community, a lot like Devin is, or just simply realizing that they have some place to go on an evening where they might not otherwise be doing something else. So there is a public safety component, there is a quality of life component, and the last thing I will say to you all is this. In my years in public service, when we are recruiting companies to come to New Mexico, there are two things that they talk about consistently over and over again, and that is, do we have a quality workforce and do we have a quality of life? They know that having facilities like this, like the zoo, the biopark, like Isotope Stadium, like potentially a new New Mexico United soccer stadium, multi-purpose facility, that their employees will have things to do in our community. So with that, I leave you with with this other piece of information. We know that as a result of the refinancing of these bonds that have made this opportunity available to the city to go to the voters, that we have additional capacity in our bonds. There is no question that we have lots of other issues that we must deal with in the city. Crime and homelessness are important issues that we know are important to address, and we continue to work hard every day to try and deal and address those issues. But the mayor is very, very interested in potentially going to the council and asking for the remainder of this bond, or a good portion of the remainder of this debt service schedule that we have, to potentially build additional housing and really put a major investment in housing so that we can ensure that we have a housing market that will reach out to those folks who are in need, especially those who live in our streets every day. This is an opportunity for us to really do two things: invest in our children and invest in the people that need our help the most with housing. And so with that, we will continue to work with the council on both of these endeavors, and I will now entertain any questions. Thank you so much.
Start with Jessica. Pretty technical. Does this letter of intent spell out the responsibilities for maintenance, utilities costs, all that sort of thing?
It does. This letter of intent specifically indicates that the New Mexico United will be the primary tenant in the facility, and they will be responsible for the operations and maintenance of the facility. There is also a stipulation in the agreement that any major capital expenses beyond $100,000 will be jointly shared between the city and the team for repairs and maintenance going forward.
Does it spell out what kind of use the city can get? Like, can you hold events at it?
The letter of intent, Jessica, also has a provision that the city will get 15 days out of the year for city and community events, so that we can use it for farmers markets, potentially maybe even trade shows, other opportunities to help neighborhoods and the community utilize the facility. And look, I think one of the things that's really super important that I admire about Peter and his ownership group is this: their commitment is to the community. I venture to say, I don't want to speak for Peter today, but I will say this: his representations to us in the course of these conversations are, this is about the community. If there's an opportunity for the community to use this field, beyond the 15 days where it doesn't impact any of the games or any of the programs they have, I know for a fact that the team is very much interested in helping support the community, especially with their commitment to the CBA and again, as he said earlier, to making this about New Mexico.
Two questions related to the women's pro team. So Peter, this might be part you, part Lawrence. Lawrence, one of them is with you too, though. First of all, if and when the women's professional team comes, will the rent of $100,000 a year, the $100,000 a year you mentioned, will that go up, or will it remain $100,000 a year with two tenants? And second, this one might be for Peter: is the women's professional team contingent on a stadium, or are you going to go forward with that anyway? And will it be USL's newly announced women's league or the National Women's Soccer League?
Let me take the first part of the question, then I'll let Peter talk about the ins and outs of getting a professional women's team here. The base rent for the use of the facility, exclusive use by the team, is $800,000 a year. That is their rent, a lot like Isotopes is, and I might say, again for my friend Jessica, the base rent for Isotopes is $700,000 a year. The base rent for New Mexico United for this facility is $800,000 a year. New Mexico United will have the opportunity to have whatever events they choose to have in that facility. So a women's team will not change the base rent, because what it will do is it will help with the concession portion of the funding, simply because they'll have more games and more use of the facility and more opportunities for New Mexicans and Albuquerqueans to go into the facility and use it. But Peter, if you want to talk a little bit about the team piece of it.
Yeah, great. I think I haven't been shy about saying that aspirationally we want to have a professional women's team. Now we have it in writing that we're committed to doing that within 3 years of having the facility built. In terms of can we do it without the stadium? The answer is unfortunately no. and here's why, is that we have a great stadium here. There's all these facilities around us, but the fact is that we don't have enough room for the programming. So Isotopes play 70 games a year. In our original schedule, we were supposed to be playing this Saturday. We have to move the game because the Isotopes have an extended schedule. That we're good with that we should have that kind of programming, but we have to work around the Isotopes. We also can't play when UNM has a football game. We also can't play when the Pit has bull riding or basketball, or the women are playing, or there's senior games, et cetera, et cetera. I know UNM wants to increase their programming, not decrease it. So, as we should, we're a growing city. So we just don't have a facility to have those dates. And so that is a big part. And what I think in this stadium is not only we're going to have a men's team and a women's team, there's going to be so many other things we can identify now, like concerts and community events. Who knows what else will come down the line? We have to trust that there's creative minds here to fill the stadium. In terms of the league, we would love to see an NWSL team here, right? Compete at the highest level. I know we can support it, and I know the ownership would get behind it. If it's not that, there's a USL Women's League. And we'll see what the landscape looks like over the next few years. So whatever we can bring here that represents us, we're going to do that.
Lawrence, why now? Why did this come up when people at the beginning when the announcement was made?
So we talked about this during our conversations with the city council, but let me give you a perspective. For those of you who follow government, and I'm not sure that all of you do as much as I do, which I admit that is my work. The legislature changed the state voting laws and state voting structures several legislative sessions ago. What does that mean? That means that they unified all these elections so that voters would not have off-year elections and elections for different issues. Our elections got voted in structure so that they're all combined on a 2-year basis, which they have been before. But the purposes of having special elections and having these elections got more difficult and challenging to have. We have this election coming up in November. It was an opportunity for us to put our best foot forward and give the voters information about about all of our bonds. Remember, we have 11 bond issues that we send out every 2 years. So this is a bond question like those bond issues. So it seemed logical to have this question put on the ballot in the November election. This document, to get to your point, is a culmination of what we said at the council meeting that night, which is we will work on a letter of intent that will spell out the relationship between New Mexico United and the city of Albuquerque for use of the facility, that will provide all the detailed information so when voters go out to vote, they have all that information at their disposal. So for us, in working on this for over a month with Peter and a lot of pulling of hairs, I had a little more before I started this, we now have an agreement that we believe is a very, very good agreement, and an opportunity now for the voters to have additional information. That information that, quite frankly, many of you have been asking me about for some time, but we just hadn't gotten there yet. And so now we've got that information so that now voters can really make an informed decision and really make that decision with as much of the information we can possibly have in mind. Now, keep in mind, one more last thing I would say about this. This letter of intent is not the end of this negotiations by any stretch. This merely means that the main points of an agreement with New Mexico United and the city of Albuquerque have now been at least finalized at this level. We still have to do a lease agreement that spells out all the details, that goes into more detail, and we also have to have a development agreement for the building of the facility. But those two agreements are not going to be in place until after the voters make the decision, because it is super important that we make sure the voters give us that decision and make that direction in November before we get into the next level of conversation, let alone making a decision on the site.
I know you don't like enter into an LOI before thinking that this is going to happen, of course, but are there any penalties or clawbacks that are spelled out in this LOI should the team not meet its 25-year lease agreement?
There are several pieces in here. One is that on a day-to-day operations, the team will be required to have insurance. The team will, for interruption, if you will, insurance, so that if something, again, like a pandemic or something else happens, that there is a way for the city to continue to get its guaranteed payment for if you will, for for the annual payment of the lease. It also has provisions in here that the team will sign an agreement for the life of the bonds, which is 25 years. And that agreement also will have in the lease agreement, will have the structure for how the city will have liquidated damages, et cetera, associated with any kind of breach of contract. Look, this is a commitment for a long term. We know things change, but we are looking to the future and looking for the investment. And I might add, look, this facility is 20 years old. We had those same agreements 20 years ago on a facility, which I'm going to say this in all earnest and honesty, with a ownership group from out of town. I know where these guys live. You all know. They are New Mexicans, and I think that's really super important. We have New Mexicans investing in New Mexico. We feel pretty comfortable that we have the clawbacks that we need necessarily in this framework. As we get into the details of the lease, I am sure we will spell them out in much more detail to ensure that we're protecting the citizens and the community.
And as kind of a follow-up, so with this kind of inching closer to like the 1 month mark before voters get their say in this, what is the city going to do in the meantime in terms of getting ready for this possibly becoming a reality? And Peter, same to you, what's the team doing in this meantime before the vote takes place?
Well, I will speak for this on the city's portion. Obviously, this letter of intent will be sent to the council for their information. Obviously, it'll be available to you all shortly after this press conference. We will get it all out to you so you all can see the basic framework. Look, right now, we put it into the hands of the community to make that decision. My perspective is that the team and all the supporters and all the community are working diligently with each other on this campaign, and I'll let Peter speak to that. But from our part, we are now in a place where, should the voters make the decision that we to support the $50 million, we are now well positioned to begin the conversations in early January to move forward with having a community conversation about the site. And I will say also having a conversation about the community benefits agreement, because we have also, just by way of information, the city has also hired a professional, if you will, CBA, if you will, consultant. And we, because we wanted to make sure that we would look at all other CBAs that have occurred across the country. For example, Tennessee and several other places where they put CBAs in place. This is the gentleman that's been working on many of those. So we now have a consultant that's giving us a framework. We'll work with the neighborhoods and the community to get a framework. So we will have all of that in line. Should the voters approve this, the city is ready to hit the ground running early next year to begin to move this forward and make this a reality. Peter, you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I think, well, one, we're focused on trying to get in the playoffs. We do have a season that's going, and the team's been playing better, so we're spending a lot of time on that, working with Lawrence on these agreements. But in all seriousness, we've been spending a lot of time in the communities that may be most heavily impacted should the bond pass, should we move forward, because we being United want to understand the issues. We're members of those communities. I have an apartment downtown, so it's not too far from where I live too. So it's really important that we hear. There's a lot of fear out there in pockets because people just don't know, and there's a ton of disinformation. This is going to raise taxes. This doesn't raise taxes. That the city's building a stadium that they're going to give to the team. It's a public facility. It's actually the reverse. We're going to make a private contribution into a public facility. That doesn't happen very often. All these other stadiums are oftentimes owned by the team, not by the city. So just trying to get the truth out there so people have the right information so that they can make an informed decision in November, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, you're going to provide a copy of the LOI? You guys have one here?
I don't have one here yet, but we will when we send out our press release, that will be included in the press release.
Can we get one here now? Today, right now?
No,
You don't have it right now?
I don't have it with me right now, but we'll get you a
You're
copy.
not giving us one? Okay.
We'll get you one.
I've heard it before, Lawrence. Come on.
I'll get it to you.
Rodeo.
We'll get you one. Just,
He promised. I heard
okay,
him.
okay.
You heard him, Peter?
I heard him. We're going to make
All
sure.
right.
I'll give it to you.
KOB.
Yeah, I mean, I can do it off to the side if everybody else knows.
Go for it.
Monopolize this, but you, M&AG, so the math on this is 50 from the city, 10 from the team, and you said 8 in state capital. The state released, or the state approved 4.1 million in the 2020 legislative session and 4.5 million in the 2021 legislative session. There seems to be about $600,000 missing, if my math is right. Can you account for that? Did that go to the study, and does that not count towards the project?
Sure. The study was a little over $450,000. So there may be some change. I said $8 point some million. So there's probably a few hundred thousand, maybe 150 or so left. But yeah, about 400,000 or so was part of the study that was done to get us to this point.
Okay, and then also on the state money, you said you guys will still go lobby for some state money. I don't know if that's the team or the city. Does that money then go towards the $50 million city contribution? Does the team get to use that towards its $10 million contribution? How does that go if the state moving forward decides we want to add more, 5 million, 10 million?
If the state would like to contribute more funding, obviously we have an opportunity to look at whether or not we, remember our bond issue and the question on the ballot is up to 50 million, up to 50 million. So it gives us flexibility on both ends. But I will say one thing, and Peter can attest to this. The $10 million from the team is a hard contribution. That is going into the facility. Our goal here is to make this as a good deal for the voters, a good deal for the city of Albuquerque. And so we're hopeful that we'll get additional funding from the state. And look, we're building a very nice facility. If we get additional dollars and we can build other amenities around the facility to make it even better, those are opportunities that we'll obviously consider, and that's part of the conversation with the state of New Mexico.
I got one question on the numbers. I'm sorry, my Northwestern and Butler math. You said $2 million a year for 25 years. What about interest? Have you calculate the interest on that bond that it's going to be?
I don't have the interest amount. Is it included in that? Yeah. It's okay. So the amount is included in that.
So what is the actual interest then on that $50 million bond overall?
We'll get to the math on that. I don't have the numbers with me off the top of my head, but.
So with isotopes, I think some years you're bringing in close to $2 million because on top of their base from $700,000,
right,
there is a revenue share up to $437,000, I think, and then there's a surcharge. Mm-hmm. And so you're getting close to $2 million on good years.
Right.
Are you definitely not doing a surcharge here?
At this point, the surcharge is not part of this calculation. I've said that, I think, to you before. We believe that the surcharge, although it worked well with this facility for its time, we want to make this affordable for the community. We want to make sure it's a good experience for the community. And more importantly, with the capital investment from the team, it now has put us in a position where we don't have to make that or have that as part of the structure for financing the construction of the project. Which again, I will say to you all, is why this is an amazing deal for the city.
We'll wrap it up and you'll get a copy of the letter.
All right, thank you all for being here. Appreciate you.
Happy to stick around.